Welcome, Mahima, to another success story interview. Congratulations on scoring a 710. 710 twice, actually. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think I feel great, but I also feel like it's been a really it's been a learning journey in a different sense, right? Because both my 710s look very different, and that's I think that's really real and that's really rare, I guess. But it's been a great journey.
Got it. So take me through your journey, right? So I remember that you started off with a 640 and verbal was a focal point for you. How did you go from
Yeah.
there and use the course to get to a 710 first with a V41, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So yeah, I took GMAT just out of college, and I had gotten a 640 just even after a significant prep, right? So when I joined e-GMAT around Jan 2021, I was very clear that I would want a 700 plus. And as I spoke to somebody from e-GMAT, they walked me through how it works and the targeted analytical approach, right? And since I'd not gotten a very good verbal score, for me the focus was that I need to, I need to do my verbal really
Yeah.
well. So I started with verbal, and given e-GMAT has a different approach, a well-known different approach, I started with verbal, being very confident in Quant. I actually started with RC, right? Just to give you an idea.
Hmm.
And I'm an avid reader, so I have a habit of reading fast. But then the approach of how we look at RC passages, of summarizing everything we read after a certain point and then making sense of it,
Hmm.
it really stuck with me. It would definitely did slow me down a little initially, but I think it just gave me a different way of looking at things, in the sense that I always used to read fast, focus on the speed more so than
Yeah.
the summary. Then I started replicating it even in my day-to-day work, right? And I realized the difference which happens in terms of synthesizing and summarizing the stuff. And I think that I really liked, and I did use it till the end. In SC and CR, I think SC was my weakest point.
Hmm.
I had not thought of dividing a sentence in such a way, right? And SC, I think I'd scored horribly even initially. And it was very daunting for me in general just to see one
Yeah.
sentence and then just figure it out. So I did start very diligently. I mean, I was going step by step, as shared by Payal in the initial video, that how do you look at the thing. I think I was the most diligent in SC, and I went
Hmm.
from step to step, looking at every video. I would say that I think, revisit a few videos
Yeah.
because they just I felt like some concepts needed a brush up, because sometimes I would just, once I started practicing, I would forget the core of it, right?
Hmm.
Even if after referring to my notes. So there were a few videos I did go back and forth to.
Got it.
But the meaning based approach and the logical aspect of it did help. Another thing that helped was that some of the, I don't know, some of the key things you need to learn from, two things, some rules
Yeah.
which are not so difficult to see, because if you see a list of 100 rules, it just overwhelms you, right? I
True.
think there was the right number of rules I had to learn while keeping logic intact, and that kind of stuck with me.
Hmm.
However, there is the topic of modifiers, which I felt very difficult. Probably a lot of people do,
Yeah.
but I found modifiers, even the videos, a little overwhelming, even after seeing them a couple of times. So I
Hmm.
think that is one place where I did look at some other resources as well. I still don't think that I was there yet. I would still, would say that modifiers is not my strong suit, but that was the portion that took me the most amount of time. So that's about that in SC. And then critical reasoning, according to me, was a life changer, in the sense of how you think about things. Because I always thought SC is the best thing in e-GMAT verbal, but I would argue that CR is the best thing. Simple reason that, again, I think the logic really stuck with me, in the sense of how we look at different types of questions, and
Hmm.
I actually would actively use it, and especially the ones which had highlighted text. For example, what is the correlation between two bolded
Right.
segments, right? So I had, and I think all the rules after I think I'd summarized was like one page. So it wasn't like a lot even when I was revising it.
Hmm.
So CR, I would say, I think I saw the maximum improvement. And then obviously then there was scholarinium, which I would use the way it was directed in terms of, how do you go about it. I would say I was probably much more diligent for my CR and SC than RC, because simple reason, I always
Yeah,
felt that was my strong suit. Weirdly, that was my that was the area where I actually scored lesser because of that. Eventually, when I saw the breakdown in ESR, but because of all of this effort, I would say that it went for a. I think I improved from a V in 20s, in my late 20s in my 640 attempt, to my mocks to late 30s, and then a surprising 41 in my
hmm,
final attempt of GMAT for 710.
got it.
I think that's about it for verbal. Any
Got it.
reactions?
I have tons of reactions to tons of things there. So let's talk about little things, right? So the SE course has a three-step approach. Now, I want to understand from you, and you mentioned this, that it requires unlearning a few things. It increases your time, and then it improves your timing, right? So take me through how that
Yeah,
meaning-based approach is really helpful, and how you kind of applied it even in your day-to-day life. You used a very interesting example.
yeah. Yeah. So I think, so once I was done with SC, right? Again, like I said, what I did was I looked at the meaning-based approach. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense, but I would keep my rules in a separate sheet, because I don't know, I just felt that was easier for me. And as I started, and then I would keep a note of all the errors I was making in the error log, which we have such, so elaborately defined.
Hmm.
That would be easier for me to read. But as I read the rules, I would started applying it to my real life. And yeah, the example, which I mean, I actually started noticing errors in the emails I would get from like my leaders and my partners in the firm. And I had the urge to like correct them, but then really did not do that. So I think those small errors, which you don't notice, or even don't
Yeah.
even know of right before, you kind of get to know. And yes, there is a lot of unlearning, I think, especially for me, or for all of them. But SC, I mean, the way we look at the meaning, I mean, that just makes a lot of logical sense, right? So I think what resonates is that it's just based on a very solid logic, that
Hmm.
this is how things should be. It takes a lot of time, yes. And especially because we're used to looking at things in a certain way. For me, the biggest problem was that I'm a little fast in the way I want to
Yeah.
do things. And and that obviously, you miss out on some key elements. So I think I
Yeah.
had to really have you get the patience to do it at a pace which should be what it should be, right? Give it the due time it deserves. So
Got
for
it.
me, that was very important.
An important question that I do have is, you're an avid reader, right? So summarization is something that probably you already were doing on a subconscious level, I would say, because all
Hmm,
good
hmm,
readers do
hmm,
that. How important do you think it is for someone who is probably not as good a reader? Because it does increase your time, but how valuable is it in the future?
hmm. That's actually good. I mean, I don't know if I can be empathetic enough, but because for me, it decreased my speed, and then kind of I went
Yeah,
back to a decent average. But I think unless you understand the meaning, I don't know how fast anybody or how much somebody reads. Unless you understand the meaning and reflect on the summary, I don't think you can move forward, right? You're probably right. I was doing it at a subconscious level, but I would say it's important because I mean, I don't think that you can move forward, because that summary just increases your time in the sense that you don't need to keep rereading the whole thing,
yeah,
right?
and
So,
that takes longer.
yeah, exactly. At the net level, you are decreasing the time, and that is exactly right. You're improving your
Got
efficiency.
it.
It's just that it might just be a longer journey, I believe.
Understood. Understood. So I
Mhm.
think you learn a lot of stuff in the verbal course, right, Mahima? And it
Yeah.
was important for you to kind of, I would say, uh, remember whatever that you've learned. So in terms of
Hmm.
revising all of the stuff that you did, how did you go
Yeah.
about revising SCCR?
Yeah. Definitely. So yeah, so I think for CR, like I said, eventually I had just one very crisp page, which by the way had like 5 iterations. The first time I took the notes, they were probably like a lot of this thing, but a lot of pages, right? But
Yeah.
then as I rewriting, I realized that some things which are the core synthesis of the whole thing, I kept it. And then that one pager literally had the 5 types or the 4 5 types of sentences we have, and the key, key bullet points on what we need to keep in mind while looking at it. For example, for the bullet points, it's the relationship between with the conclusion, right? For
Yeah.
example, so those arrows, since you've already read it so many times, those bullet points, even if it doesn't make sense to another third person, it would make sense to you.
Do you?
So I try to really compile my revision to as less number of pages as possible. For SC, I think two things what I did was, for example, first, for definitely the rules, right?
Hmm.
So all of your verbs and your modifiers and those from and to, and those some rules you need to keep in
Yeah.
mind. Uh, I had all of those in one place. Some of them also from different places I had seen. Then I had a one pager which basically had some uh, errors I had done, or something, for example, which I had done a lot. But I'll tell you one mistake I had done, right? The first time I did that, I realized that when I would read it again, it would not make any sense
Hmm.
because this was just so contextual to that sentence. And then I realized that that's where I refer to my error log. So for my error log, I would look at those specific context specific, questions, pointers, sorry, because
Got
they
it.
would otherwise not make sense.
Got it.
RC, not really much
Yeah,
to
I
do.
know.
I think I would just do just like, a couple of
Understood.
RCs. That's it.
Understood. So I think that kind of sums up your verbal journey to kind of 41, right? And then eventually, I think we got in touch when you scored the
Yeah,
Q47 and the V41, and that's when you kind of got inducted into the LM program. So now take me through your journey after that score.
yeah, yeah. I think so. After that, it was a difficult journey because what had happened is, at a personal level, right? I had exhausted a lot of my leaves for GMAT, right? So I was at a time where I had a lot of work, and that was not something I could give up now, because my aim was not to retake it again, right? So I was at a higher working load time. However, I was pretty shocked with Q47, so I needed some direct, and I was short on time. Like, I knew that I couldn't spend as much time and stuff on that. So basically, when we got in touch, I mean, the first thing which I think we did, which was pretty amazing to me, was analysis of the ESR, right? We realized that how in verbal also things were a little different what we would think. There were some
Yeah.
times where we were faster, and RC was actually low on accuracy compared to others. And then we were faster in some questions, which was pretty weird, because I had like 10 minutes left after
Yeah.
verbal. But for quant, then we saw that I think algebra and number properties and a little bit of word problems, they were not my strong area. They were my weakest suit, right? And what had happened in the first attempt was that, like I said, I was always very confident with Q. The first time I'd scored a 640, I'd gotten a Q48. So I was actually quite confident
Hmm.
with my Q, and this time I scored lesser, right? So I think I was a little overconfident. So I
Hmm.
hadn't gone through all the whole course as diligently as I should have.
Yeah.
So what worked with us was that we went through it, and then we started with the weaker points, algebra, etc. And then what I liked was that I was time bound. It would give me a certain number of days to do it. What I lacked in this attempt was a discipline, because
Yeah.
whatever, right? I think it was also a little bit of personal, but also the fact that maybe, I don't know, it could have been better. So how I really, first, what I really liked about it was that you were there to push me. I remember you'd send me an email twice, I think, that we're not doing it on time, and it was a little embarrassing of an email, but yeah, I mean, you would call it out, right? And that is what I
Hmm.
needed from that we're not going on time. We should probably be doing this thing as defined before, right? The second thing was also like a very targeted approach, right? We were not boiling the ocean here. We needed a specific jump, and that is what we were aiming for.
Yeah.
So I think that really helped. It did take longer than I think we had initially planned, right? It wasn't an
Yeah.
easy journey for multiple reasons. So that was there. In terms of geometry and other things, I was pretty decent. So we were looking at scholarium. I loved, what I really liked was the ability quizzes, I think, or sorry, the ability quizzes, I think, the second phase, which we called, right, in our
Yeah.
mile, in our
So
last
there's
mile
semantic
roadmap.
quizzes, and then there's
Then the
intermediate test
yeah,
readiness, and then penultimate.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the intermediate test readiness really gave me like a reality check. It was thrilling because it was hard questions back to back. And I
Yeah.
remember reaching out to you saying that, when I don't have the time, I'm able to do all of those questions. When I have a little bit extra time, but I'm not able to. So I hadn't thought of it from that lens, like a very specific time. The number of questions you had also defined was so specific. I think I think that was exactly what I had needed at that time.
Hmm.
And that I did do a concerted effort on Q right after that. I think, and then overall, yes, we did end up jumping from a Q47 to Q49.
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe if I was diligent enough, maybe it could have been a Q50. But I think we did do what we did had planned initially. It was
Yeah.
in terms of Q. Uh, Weirdly, I also end up, my score became more balanced, right? For me, it
Yeah.
was like that is also important, right? Because I didn't think
Oh,
my
it
previous
is.
score had
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, because I did not think that my previous score was as indicative of my quantitative abilities, like I said.
Yeah.
So for me, that was very important.
Got it. Very interesting journey. And I think I would say the big takeaway here is that, not all stories are like fairy tales, right? Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
there's certain things that we work towards, and there's certain things that don't work out at the end. And it's not like you did anything less or I did. I mean, it's just that's how the GMAT
Mm.
is, right? And
Yeah.
that truth needs to come out, and you need to tell people. And I'm glad that you talked about your story today, where in which you had your verbal improvement and your quant. And I think it's been a wonderful journey for me as well as a mentor, because uh, more than anything, a lot of people think the LM program is more about hyper specific plans. Well, it is, but then we put on a lot of time to see what you guys are doing. And no one really does that in today's date, especially with self-paced course.
Yeah.
So that's a massive value add.
Mm.
Having said that, any final takeaways for people wanting to score a 700 plus on the GMAT?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would just have one, right? I mean, yes, it takes time, and I'm sure everybody has their own journey. But I think we just need to enjoy the journey and ensure that it's making sense to you. I think as you start, things were making sense to me. It had a logic behind it. I think it did not feel that hard. Yes, like you said, it's not a 770 story yet, but not. I mean, not. But I would still say that do identify your weaknesses and then be diligent and honest with yourself, because I think that is something which I could have done better in my first attempt.
Perfect. Perfect. That's a great ending. Thank you so much. And I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Sanjay. Take care.